This is my farm. It's on the brink of bankruptcy. Today, we will work in the field, build our first production facilities, and even buy new equipment. All of this is to ensure the farm starts generating tens of thousands of dollars every month. If you're already interested, subscribe to the channel and we'll get started. To start the restoration of the farm, the first thing I needed to do was buy it. So I drove my pickup truck there, and there it is. Well, it doesn't look as terrible as I imagined. Let's take a look around. There were many buildings on this vast plot, but as you can see, they are in terrible condition. This doesn't scare me at all because I'm here to create my own large farm. So I bought it. After the purchase, we were left with almost no money. Fortunately, there was old equipment on the farm, and I even managed to find one tractor. There was also an ATV, but it wouldn't start. So I decided to gather all the equipment in one place to see what we could use. Overall, everything I found was quite useful and in working condition, except for the broken ATV. Therefore, I decided to sell it. I drove up to it with the pickup truck, opened the tailgate, and loaded it into the truck. Then I headed to the store to sell it. A few minutes later, I was there. Carefully unloading it, I went into the store and successfully sold it. With the money earned, I bought a brand new chainsaw, which we would need for working with wood. Then I got back into the pickup and headed towards our farm, where I planned to try making money from firewood. Not far from our farm was a stream, with plenty of trees beyond it. Driving along the stream, I didn't find a bridge, so I decided to carefully cross it. Fortunately, we managed without any problems. Choosing a suitable tree, I cut it down. To fit it into our pickup, I carefully cut it into small parts. Then I loaded everything into the truck bed, secured the wood with straps, and set off to sell it. Arriving at the wood selling point, I removed the straps from the logs and sold them, making my first profit of just over $9,000. Then I went to the store, where with the money earned, I decided to buy a log trailer and a few fuel cans for the tractor. After putting the fuel cans in the pickup's trunk, I hitched the trailer and headed back to the farm. Upon arrival, the first thing I decided to do was demolish the old barn. This would be the first step in restoring our farm, as the new hangar would be useful for storing all our equipment. The demolition cost $10,000. I then decided to build a new hangar, which cost me $5,000. After it was built, I went inside and realized there was a lot of trash on the farm, so I started cleaning it up. Once all the trash was cleared, I moved all the found equipment inside the hangar except for the loader, as it didn't fit. Taking the car, I drove up to the tractor to unload the purchased fuel cans. I then carried them to the tractor. Sitting in the tractor, I started refueling it. After refueling, I decided to continue preparing firewood as we needed money. Hitching the trailer, I headed to the forest. Not far from the farm, I saw some good spruce trees and decided to go to them. Upon arrival, I parked the tractor and got to work. I cut down the first tree and carefully began clearing it of excess branches. After cutting off the top of the tree, I roughly measured the length of the logs for our new trailer. Surprisingly, despite my poor accuracy, the first log fit perfectly. So I decided to cut the rest of the logs to the same length. After loading the first tree, there was still quite a bit of space left on the trailer, so I decided to cut down another tree. Clearing it, I cut more logs to the same length and started loading them. When I finished loading, the trailer was completely full. I think this will be enough. So I carefully secured all the logs with straps to ensure nothing would be lost on the way. And then I headed to the selling point. Upon arrival, I got out of the tractor and removed the straps. After selling the logs, we earned a good amount of $21,000. I was very happy with the money earned as we needed it very much. After selling the firewood and earning a good amount of money, I headed back to the farm. Upon arrival, I unhitched the trailer and went to the store. I realized it was time to start working on the fields. Luckily, we already had most of the necessary equipment. Once I got to the store, before buying anything, I checked the crop prices to determine the most profitable one for us. It turned out to be corn. For planting corn, we needed a planter, so we bought one. Among all the options, the John Deere planter caught my eye. It was perfect for us in terms of power and price. We had to spend a little over $12,000 on it. After purchasing it, I hooked it up to the tractor, but I didn't rush back to the farm yet because we still needed to buy seeds. This could be done near the store itself. I drove over, opened the top covers of the planter, and filled it to the brim. The seeds cost us $2,500. Now we could head back to the farm, as we had a lot of work ahead in creating our first field. Upon returning, the first thing I did was detach the planter, as we needed the deep ripper to create our field. Luckily, I hadn't sold it, knowing we would need it eventually. Leaving the boundaries of our farm, I decided to look for a suitable spot to create our first field. Fortunately, this entire area belongs to us, so without much hesitation, I began marking the borders of the future field. It will be right in front of our farm. After finishing with the borders, I started plowing all the land within them. I hope this process won't take too much time. After about half an hour of work, this old tractor was still performing quite well. You can also see that it's getting dark, and according to the weather forecast, rain is expected. Because of this, I started to worry, hoping we could finish the work before it started. As time went on, I kept working, even though it had gotten so dark that I had to turn on the headlights since I could barely see the field. In the end, I wasn't destined to finish plowing the field that day, as unfortunately, our tractor ran out of fuel. Since the store was already closed at that hour, I decided to set up a tent on our farm and wait for the next morning. Waking up early the next day, the first thing I did was head to the field to assess the remaining work, since it was too dark to see the previous night. The tractor was still in the same spot, and it hadn't magically refueled itself, so I got into my pickup and drove to the store. I bought 7 fuel canisters, opened the tailgate, and carefully loaded them, securing them with straps. Then, I headed back to the tractor. Upon arrival, I unloaded a couple of canisters and started refueling the tractor. Once there were several dozen liters in the tank, I decided it was enough. So I got back into the pickup and returned it to the farm to keep it out of the way. Returning to the field, I immediately resumed my work, and after a few minutes, I finally completed the task. The final result was a freshly plowed field. Now it was time to plant the seeds. After attaching the planter, I drove onto the field and began planting. Since the planter was quite wide, this process shouldn't take much time, and after a little over 2 hours, the field was fully planted. There were still some seeds left in the planter, so I decided to save them. Now, it was time to wait for our corn to start growing. So, I decided to focus on making money, since we don't have much of it right now. Since we only have one way to earn money, we are returning to cutting firewood. For this, I took a log trailer and went back to the place where we had already been cutting trees. After cutting down a tree, it fell on our trailer, but this didn't hinder us from cutting it into smaller pieces. After loading it onto the trailer, I immediately started cutting the next tree. Once I filled the trailer to the top, I secured the logs with straps and headed to the selling point. On the way, I noticed that it started to rain and realized that we were really lucky to finish the work in the field in time. Meanwhile, I reached the selling point and sold all the wood, earning $25,000. I figured that one trailer wasn't enough, so I went back for more wood. We received roughly the same amount of money for the second trailer, which is quite enough, so now we're heading to the farm. Upon arrival, I realized that we have more of our own land in front of the farm, next to the field where a lot of grass grows, so I thought it would be sensible to deal with that, since it means extra money. So, let's not waste any time and go to the store to buy a lawnmower. At the store, I went to the mower section and chose one of the cheapest options for $2,000. After buying it, we returned to the farm and started working. I will stick to the same principle as when creating the field. First, we marked out the area where we would be mowing the grass, and then we started mowing within these boundaries. Personally, this method is the most convenient for me. In the middle of the process, we ran out of fuel in the tractor again, so we took the pickup truck to refuel it. After refueling, we continued working. As you can see, this process took quite a bit of time since I finished only when it was already dark outside. And since I didn't want to work in the dark, we decided to rest, leaving the remaining work for the next day. The next morning, we went straight to the store. Passing the field, I noticed that our crops were already gradually growing, which was encouraging. In the store, we bought an old windrower to gather all the mowed grass into piles, as well as a couple of fuel cans for a full refuel of our tractor, since I was tired of refueling it little by little. Back at the farm, I quickly gathered the grass into small piles for easy work with the baler, so immediately after that, we went to the store to buy a baler. It cost us $17,000, a great price for such equipment. By this point, I was extremely tired from working with the grass, but there was no turning back, so I slowly baled all the grass. This took me almost 3 hours, but fortunately, we finished baling all the grass. If you think that's the end, you're mistaken. Next, all the bales needed to be wrapped, and for that, I needed the simplest bale wrapper. By evening, all the bales were wrapped in film, which made me very happy, so I went to rest after such a hard day's work. For the next 3 months, I decided to wait until our corn in the field was ripe and the grass in the bales fermented into silage. By the end of these 3 months, I thought they would be ready for sale, but we still needed something to transport them, so we got into the tractor and headed to the store. There, we needed to buy a universal trailer that would work both for transporting bales and for harvesting. I chose this simple option, which costs $14,000, so I bought it along with several cans of fuel. After pouring all the diesel into the tractor, we took the trailer and headed to the farm for the bales. Upon arrival, I began carefully rolling them and loading them onto the trailer, securing them with straps. After loading the first trailer, we could head to the selling point, as I was eagerly looking forward to seeing how much we would earn. When we arrived, we unfastened the straps and slowly moved the bales one by one onto the train car. In total, we earned almost $30,000 from selling the bales, which I think is quite good. Returning to the farm, we used the earnings to build a silage pit, as simply selling the corn would not be profitable. We will make silage from it. After building the pit, I thought it was time to start harvesting. But for that, we needed to put sides on the trailer and buy a combine harvester. So let's build a workshop, then drive the trailer into it and install the sides. As you can see, the trailer is now quite functional. Now it's time for the header, so we're heading to the store. At the store, I started selecting the equipment we could use to harvest our crop. I liked an old header, so we bought it for $15,000. After hooking the header to the tractor, I immediately went to the field where I left it and then went to pick up the trailer. After retrieving it, I began assembling the entire harvesting setup. After some adjustments, I managed to get it all together. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. After several months on this farm, I was now harvesting on my own field with my own equipment. I was very pleased about it. Within 10 minutes, the trailer was already full of chopped corn. The old header was working well. After attaching the trailer to the tractor, we headed to the silage pit. Upon entering it, I opened the right side and began unloading at a leisurely pace. After successfully unloading the entire trailer, we returned to the field, where we hooked up the header again and continued working. After a while, half of the crop had already been harvested. This header was simply excellent. I did not regret buying it. When we brought another trailer to the pit, it was already difficult to unload, so after unloading the corn, I decided to compact it, to make it easier to drive in next time. After driving around a few times with the tractor, I went back to finish harvesting the field, where it seemed to me that there were still a few more trailers to go. In the end, after 4 hours, the field was completely harvested. Now we just needed to compact all the forage in the silage pit and cover it with a tarp. After leaving all the equipment, I went to the silage pit and started compacting our forage. Soon, the compacting reached its maximum, after which we covered the pit. Once all the tasks were complete, we gathered all the equipment and took it back to the farm. After parking the tractor, I went to rest, as we had done a lot of work today. The next morning, I noticed that a lot of equipment had accumulated on the farm, and there wasn't much space for it, so I decided to build something. But we didn't have enough money in the balance, so without wasting time, I took the trailer and went to our workshop to upgrade it. After that, I went to our bales, carefully rolling them onto the trailer, securing them with straps, and headed to the selling point. Upon arrival, I removed the straps and carefully moved the bales onto the train car. After selling them, we earned a total of $27,000. I think this will be enough for my plans. So we returned to the farm. Once back, I decided to demolish the old building next to our barn and build a new shed where we could store all our equipment. Building the new shed cost us $12,000. After completing the construction, I began moving all the equipment that didn't fit in the barn, as well as the auger we found on the farm. After arranging all the equipment in its place, I also parked the tractor. We still had a little money left, so I decided to demolish the old abandoned house, spending almost $10,000. And I will move our tent there. In the future, we will build our house there. That's it. All the tasks are completed. The harvest is gathered, the bales are sold, and we just need to wait for the silage to ferment. We worked hard this year and made significant progress on the farm, but that's not all. If you want to see more, just subscribe to the channel. Bye for now.